Hi, I'm Jasenia, New England Psychic Medium, and I'm creator of the Soul Reintegration Healing Modality and author of Spiritual Development with the New England Psychic Medium. Now, I created this video to help guide people in my process because it's an incredibly unique system as it was created by me. So it's very difficult to understand the process coming in from an outsider. If you've ever had other psychic medium readings, these readings are really not the same. They're very, very unique, and we get a lot of information in every report. So the specific process and system is guided so that people can retain as much of the information as possible, meaning that they're not usually done on a phone call kind of scenario. Akashic Reports 1 through 4 are actually done as emailed reports. The reason being is because so much information comes up about our soul, whether it's soul origins, soul structures, soul gifts, every single chakra, any blocks or past lives in each chakra, and how to remove those lives or do your homework to continue healing after I've removed those lives. So there's a lot of information that comes up. I also add links that I've found useful and videos I've created to help support people within the reports. So those specifically are done online via email reports. I also have clients all over the world, so finding times to line up was very difficult. So it helps the whole process. Now, soul reintegration is the understanding that we function best when we are active participants in our spiritual development process. And the idea is that if we are not fully connected to our soul, then we're in a place where we feel like we're being used. We're not aware of our abilities. We're not aware of what's happening energetically. We're not aware of the information we're downloading or getting from source or our higher self. So the issue is that we have a lot of developmental delays when it comes to our gifts and our abilities. Most people, or many people in the spiritual development community truly believe that being an active participant is somehow forcing the lines of destiny somehow, and that is absolutely not correct. There are ways that we push and force lines of destiny, and we try to force ourselves into places we shouldn't be. But spiritual development and understanding your gifts is not one of them. For example, your gifts, the gifts that are not made for you in this life will never be available to you. One of my abilities is I can activate gifts when the person is ready. So we have to heal before we open gifts because healing is always a priority. If we are unhealed, we are unintegrated. Therefore, our gifts work erratically if they are open. So we do the healing first, the integration, and then we do gift activation. Gift activation would not be available and is not available for people who have not done the healing system. Our guides would not allow it. Your higher self would not allow it. So in that way, we only can activate things we are currently ready for energetically. Now, this doesn't include people who use drugs as a form of gift activation. Now, people do that. And in that way, you can have issues with your gifts because what you do is you are blurring the lines between your reality and your gifts, and then that can be very hard for you to digest mentally, and that is a whole issue in itself, and that is not a part of this process. There are none of those things involved in the soul reintegration system. So the soul reintegration is the idea that we can be one with our soul again if we can remove and heal the places in us that have found blocks and obstructions. Our emotional body is a trigger for these blocks and obstructions. What that means is if we are feeling any particular way about ourselves or our environment or anybody, it is a reflection of a place within us that needs healing. And because humans are not aware of this process, most of the time they just allow the emotions to fester and layer and become more obstructive until they actually turn into physical ailments and other issues that we can get, emotional disorders, mental disorders, a whole bunch of other stuff that can happen from our gifts functioning erratically or our energy functioning erratically. And then in that case, we would need to see a medical professional, and we would need to do something else because it's become such an issue that it affects our way of life completely. So it's the understanding by removing and healing this as it shows up and as it comes up as it makes itself present in our physical expression, that we can connect better to the soul. And that makes sense. If we don't have a lot of pain and obstructions and blocks keeping us from being our full self, if we can understand our past lives and lessons, if we can open up those stories and then acknowledge the fragments of us that have been lost, hurt, or damaged, and then if we can send those fragments off to healing, we have more energy to be here. We have more energy to be present, and we have more ability to be functional and to be active part of our evolutionary process. So it's important that we understand the difference between those. We are working to make the best out of what we are given. We are working to heal the obstructing past lives so that we may function to our fullest potential here with the story we have written ourselves. Our higher self is in charge of managing our multiple lives. So our higher self is where we are guided through these incarnations, these removals, these healings, and then these activations. So I write a lot on the page, and I try to explain a lot of the process because it is so unique that people end up having a lot of questions. What happens is after you book on the website, and the reports are very easily lined up in the order where they're supposed to be used. Akashic Report One is about the soul and any deep energetic tears and leaks to the soul, and soul characteristics, soul origins, and a lot of other aspects of the soul. What we're really looking for in Akashic Report 1 are any intense energetic tears, scars, contracts, or agreements that have binded us from healing and moving on through the most traumatic lives. The reason we do these first is because usually these are the lives that would cause energetic tears and leaks. And moving on without healing those tears and leaks is like having a bucket with holes in it. You can't fill a bucket that has holes in it. It's never going to work. So you can go to Reiki every day, and you can see your therapist every day, and you can try to do, you can meditate 8 hours a day, but you're never going to feel like you're accomplishing your goals. And that leaves us in a place of perpetual struggling. Then we move to Akashic Report 2. Akashic Report 2 is of the physical body and experience. So that's when we scan the current body for any obstructions that have repeated patterns in our current life. For example, if we have an issue with relationships this whole life, we might see that in that report, or we would see that in this report, and then we could remove any obstructing lives that have created those patterns in relationships. By remove, I mean we heal those fragments of us that are stuck in that life, reliving that pain. And that is why we get that energetic pull back to that life, and that's why we get those repeated patterns. We get repeated patterns because it's that life's way of calling us to action. If they're not receiving the healing and the energy they need, then they're going to pull to their brothers and sisters for assistance, and that would be us. That would be us in the consecutive lives line, and that would be all of the lives under your higher self. So that's why they cause us so much harm and damage. It's your soul's call for assistance to heal. So by removal, we don't disconnect or disassociate ourselves from those lives of trauma. We heal, we understand, we acknowledge, and then we send them up for healing to our home dimension. So we would locate those lives, remove those lives, repair, reconstruct, replace fragments, whatever it is that needs to be done there. And then you would get the report with all the information on it. Now, the next report is 2A, and I call it an optional report because it's really about relationships. This is really about people who have intense relationship issues, because relationships can be more involved than just Report 2. Report 2 really focuses on the full energetic body. And this is like a half report, and its focus is only on relationship, whether it be our children, our friendships, or our partners. And it does reconstruction and work, and you can get your life partner's themes. You can get information about your twin flame or your soulmates and your soul structure, and It can be a really fun report, but it's optional. Some people do it for fun. Some people feel like they need extra help in the relationship category, so they would choose that report. Report 3 is where we do gift activation. Sometime in between 2 and 3, sometimes, not all the time, we have souls who have a lot of really deep traumas. Now, if we had done report 2 and you're one of those souls that has really energetic deep traumas, we might suggest past life journeying somewhere in between those reports. And the reason is because past life journeying really just goes through as many lives as possible in a 2-hour span where we could heal, remove, and reconstruct. Some souls, depending on their soul structure and their vibrational energy, take on so much in their lives in terms of missions, goals, and they truly want to change the world. And that means that they usually take on a lot of trauma. And in cases like that, we would need to do more work and removals. When we get to report 3, it's about gift activation and understanding our gifts. Now, when I read gifts, it is very specific. I see exactly what you can do and how to do it. I'm not going to give you some really vague word that doesn't really mean anything to us that somebody made up and put on Google. I'm going to give you specifically what your gift set does, what your energy is made to do. And our gifts are weaved in our soul, at our soul's spark, at our soul's birth. And what happens is through our lives, through experience, through understanding, we can evolve and activate these gifts. Sometimes we have gifts that are not available in our specific life because they're not necessary for this life. In that form, they might show up redacted, or they might just show up inactive, and there is no reason to activate, and they would not allow activation because we're not going to use it in this life. Some of our gifts are simply inactive because we don't understand them, we don't understand how to use them. Some gifts are inactive because there's way too much healing that needs to be done. For example, a very traumatized, damaged soul, or a soul that's taken a lot of negative energy, is not going to be able to activate their gifts. If anything, their soul goes into survival mode and shuts down gifts so that we can focus on healing. Because without healing, we have an issue with survival. So survival is always going to be first. And this is why I don't recommend people jump to report 3. I just feel like energetically it's a waste of money and time, because if we get to report 3, we're going to find that we have a lot of things we can't do and a lot of gifts we can't activate because we have not done the healing process. And if you've had 700 lives, you have 700 opportunities to have some kind of trauma within those lives. Now, I've had a huge variety with very young souls who still have trauma and obstructions, because sometimes we take on traumas on soul level. So we have lives between lives. Our souls take on missions, jobs, and a whole bunch of other things in between our incarnations. So even a younger soul who has not had a lot of incarnations, and by younger is really a subjective term to our perspective here on earth, because there's no time on the other side. But by younger, I mean a soul who has not taken on a lot of incarnations. They can still have traumas, sometimes even more horrific traumas, because the world is such a new place for them and they have not really been able to adjust to the atmosphere here and the way of humanity. And then I've had souls who are right on the brink of their full development, and they're still having a hard time healing and removing some of their obstructing lives that have really caused them pain and trauma. And they are literally the last step to their full activation and understanding, or their full actualization as beings on earth. Now, that is incredibly rare. I think I've maybe had 2 in the whole time I've been doing my work, and I've had over 1,000 clients. So that is definitely a rare occurrence, but I've had clients on that full spectrum, from newbies to graduates, nearly graduates of Earth. So my process, and 3A, report 3A is another optional report. It's not a necessary report, but I think it's one of those fun ones. I can see all kinds of spirit and all kinds of soul groups and all kinds of soul group creators and a lot of energy. I have a group of gifts that work together to maintain this modality. And report 3 is about knowing who your guides are. So sometimes when we get gifts, we actually activate, when we activate new gifts, we can activate guides for those gifts. Those guides would come forward as activated guides. Now, in report 1, when I see somebody's guides, I can sometimes see their inactive guides waiting to be activated. And some of those have to do with gifts. Some of them have to do with changes in their life, huge shifts and changes where that guide would now become necessary. Or they have to do with family members who have deceased and are now working as guides, and they're just waiting for their turn, their place in that person's life. So they show up as inactive. And then when we move to report 3A, we get to kind of compare the two. We get to say how many we have left that are active and how many are still inactive. We get to learn their names if they have names. The reason why I say if they have names is because these souls are not always physical beings. They don't incarnate as physical beings. Some soul groups specifically work only as guides. The reason is because they are fully evolved. They have already mastered their incarnations. They no longer need to incarnate. So they stay at soul side. So sometimes their names are actually vibrational tones we cannot verbalize based on our human form. So sometimes they just let us call them things that are similar enough. And that would be their name. And then I get to see their appearance. We get to talk about their jobs, their mannerisms, their functionality with you. For example, what kind of job and work they do and how to make the most of their work with you and how to or when to call upon them for assistance. And that can be really fun to know our team and know what their jobs and responsibilities are and when to call upon them. Now, what happens is, when you book these sessions on the website, it's a self-booking website, so there's no pressure. You get to book whenever you feel comfortable. And when you book them, the Sunday before your session, I send out a questionnaire. The questionnaires go straight to your email, and you can respond to them. And then the reports are delivered the day of booking or 24 hours within your booking window. And I say 24 hours because, like I said, I have clients all over the world. So the day of booking can really vary when it comes to certain time frames here. If it's 12 at night or 12 midnight for you on your time frame, then you might not get that report exactly then and there. So 24 hours around our booking window. Now, not all of my sessions work this way, but I really like the process. And the reason I like the process is because, like I said, you can always go back to your email and you can see the chart. We have in my emails, I include definitions, links, websites, guided meditations, chakra homework, and I go through every single chakra and we talk about everything involved in those chakras, what's showing up in your energy. Now, not all souls have chakras, and I think that's pretty fascinating information to understand. Depending on the person's soul group and origination, sometimes they just don't have chakras. Chakras are really just energetic filing systems to the soul. It's a nice program that works very well with Earth, but some souls just don't have that kind of program. And in that case, I can still read those souls, and I still sometimes use the chakra system just to organize the information. But if a soul would not have chakras, I just tell the client that they don't have chakras and you still get the report. It's just less loosely structured because, like I said, the chakras are an organization system for the soul. So if you don't have chakras, it just kind of is a huge essay of information as opposed to a structured chakra system with themes. So, but I can read people with those energies. I just note that because some people worry what happens if I don't have chakras, how can I be read, if I can be read. I have not had an issue reading anybody. And I think that's important to understand too, because a lot of, for example, I could not be read by other people. And it got really difficult for me as I was really losing hope in other readers. And I thought, well, I'll never be able to find somebody who can tell me anything about myself. And this was a time in my life where I was really confused. All my gifts were working erratically. I had no idea what was going on with my body, my energy, or anything, but I knew that I had to do something about it. So I was getting very, very discouraged. And eventually a voice came to me and said, you can't be read because your job is to create the system that helps you. So then I just began the process of listening And, slowly, very slowly but surely, I got here, being an active participant in my spiritual development. So it's allowed me to create this process, this soul reintegration process, that I can now guide and teach others. I do have a spiritual development class too. Now, the spiritual development class includes the 3 major reports, 1, 2, and 3. And it also includes everything I know about the soul origins, what happens, how to heal the soul, and how to keep developing. It's for people who are very, very serious about their spiritual development. I call it the last spiritual development class you'll need because I feel like it truly is. Now, for example, like when I said, when I was searching for answers, I had been to many groups, I had been to many people, I had read so many books on their theories and their ways, and there was always questions. There were always big gaps. There were always like leaps from A to B with no description in what was going on in between. And I am a very curious person naturally, so I had a very hard time with that. I was not comfortable not having answers. And my system is not like that, especially being in class. I've had clients who message me at all times of the day, asking me all kinds of questions, and I encourage it because I love to challenge myself and I love to learn new things. So if I don't know something, then I want to figure it out too. My class is just, there's a lot that goes into it. For example, we talk about even the birth of gods, the birth of soul groups, the integration process, the evolution of the soul, the goal here on earth, the goal in other incarnations and places. Pretty much the reason how all of the things that make the spiritual development world really reflect Earth's history. So we can see the connection to both. I know that most people on the spiritual world really have this inner war between science and spirituality, but I believe that they're very connected, and I don't see any differences or obstructions, only that science has yet to evolve the tools needed to measure some of the things we experience on the soul level, just because we have yet to create those tools. Not because there is a gap there, because there isn't. They correlate hand in hand. And when we talk about spiritual development and some of the first incarnated souls on earth, we can see how those go hand in hand. So it's a pretty fascinating topic with a lot of details and a lot of fun. Now, most of my reports work that way when it comes to the email questionnaire and the receiving an email. And the reason is because, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not a typical psychic medium. So I'm not going to give you very general questions about you, your body, or your energy. I get real specific. And if there's a life, I'm going to remove it and heal it. If there's reconstruction that needs to be done, I will do it. If there's energy work that needs to be done, I do it. All of my reports include energetic work. If there's links that need to be sent, I'll find them and I'll send them. I take a lot of time to prepare an actual report. And that information is something that I feel gets lost during communication or on the phone. I mean, if you're anything like me, I hear 3 things and I remember 1. So to me, that's a waste of everybody's time. It's a waste of my client's time. It's a waste of my time because I do all of this work and I like to have a written copy, and I like my clients to be able to have that to look back on. Even in terms of our mediumship connections, I have had such powerful, profound, beautiful information come through. And my clients have come back to thank me for having a physical copy of the information that's coming through so that they could keep that as memorabilia for their connection to their deceased loved one. And I think that's really powerful. There are a couple of sessions that I have that are either in person or on the phone, and I recommend those for regular psychic stuff. You know, if you're coming to me and you have a list of questions you want to address, a phone conversation is fine, but I do recommend that people have some kind of recording device so that they could record the information coming through, even if they have me on speakerphone or anything else. And if you have an in-person session with me, I always try my best to bring my own recorder, and then I'll email the recording after the session. So those would be the only sessions that are done a little bit differently, but they're very limited. The reason why is because there's, you know, I would have to leave the house and book a place and get people to show up and fill a day. And most of my clients are online all over the world. So one specific place is, it's just more limited. When I do have sessions available in person, I list them on my page, whether it's Facebook or the website under in-person bookings and sessions. And if for some reason you feel drawn to an in-person session, you can always request some kind of opening, and I can look into a date that works for everybody involved. So that's most of my process and most of my idea. And I like to get to this idea here. A lot of people believe that spiritual development, being involved in your spiritual development, is somehow forcing the process. And I want to note that this process really can't be forced. Your gifts are written to activate at specific times. What happens is our inactive or our lack of involvement usually delays that activation. So what we really do is we get to a place where I'm dealing with a client who has delayed their own activation and progress and development for so long that we can now remove, heal, and activate the gifts at the same time. So it's not like we are forcing evolution. It's not like we are forcing time or development, because our guides simply would not allow anything that wasn't best for us when it came to our spiritual development and our gift use, especially gifts. The reason being because they're not necessary part of our lives, but they do help. So it doesn't make any sense at all for them to activate those early and cause us more damage and harm when they're supposed to be tools of development and tools of understanding and tools of helping and healing, and not obstructions. So we don't activate things early. We don't force development or evolution. We are simply being active participants in the process. And part of this that gets me to is some people might comment and say that we are... if we are using our gifts inappropriately or whatever it is. And if we were using our gifts inappropriately, they can be taken from us and removed. So there's no worry there either. If you are not using your gifts to better yourself, or if you're putting yourself in danger or in harm, or if you're hurting others, your gifts can very easily be removed. They get shut down or numbed down by your higher self. So it's not a punishment, it's a form of protection. It's a form of self-preservation. So we don't ever have that issue either. I have had clients in the past who have had very traumatic experiences in this life, where they maybe have tried to hurt themselves or hurt others or take their own life or take another's life. And in a situation like that, their higher self deemed it necessary to mute their gifts for the rest of this life so that they could find the healing necessary before they could activate and open them. And there are other ways to get gifts down other paths, but they are not essentially soul-level gifts. They would be gifts of amplifying Earth's energy to use them for the things that you wish. And those are because our source will never fund energy, will never fund gifts energetically that are made to destroy us. So if somebody is functioning on the self-destructive path or destroying self and others through their gifts, then those are not being funded by a source. They're being funded by other methods. And what I mean by funded is they're being fueled by other deities that are not working on the soul development and master merge concept. They're usually functioning on chaos destruction, and that's why they don't really care about people being hurt in that process. And it's a very different system. Now, I myself have the ability to see all kinds of souls, and one of my gifts is demonic removal and negative entity removal. And actually, when I do the reports, if you have some kind of connection, whether it be a haunting in your house or a connection on you or some kind of possession, it would come up in your reports. And then I have the ability to remove those entities and take them out. And it's because sometimes we have lives where we fund gifts in a bad way or in a negative way that becomes destructive for ourselves and our soul. And it does follow us throughout our lives. So we might have some kind of attachment that we have yet to remove based on a life where we made some decisions that were not best for us. And we all have lives where we've made decisions that are not good for us. I think that's really important to understand. We learn here on Earth through experience. So everything here on earth is experience. If we know that hurting others is wrong, it's because we've experienced that in a past life. If we know that greed is wrong, it's because we've been greedy. If we know that harming others is wrong, it's because we've harmed others. And I think that's really important and powerful to understand. Earth is a place of experience. We learn through experience. So if we know that something is wrong or right, it's because we've experienced that. So we have had lives where we have done less than, positive things, where we might have hurt ourselves or others, and it's a very common thing to come across. I also want to note that sometimes in these reports we can see karmatic cycles or ancestral karma, and that's really powerful. For example, if we have lives where we have not completed our missions, we might just keep reincarnating into the same family until we complete that mission. So it's like picking up where you left off in another body, in another form. So in that way, you could be your own great-grandchild. And you would be picking up your family's karma. You would be picking up where you left off. You would be picking up and healing what it is you created in that life way back when. And we can see those patterns, and we can kind of make that an easier shift. Because what happens is through every incarnation, you pick up the layers and layers and layers and layers. So you would pick up your behavior, your mother's behavior, your great-grandmother's behavior, all the way back to where it began, which would have been that life. So we can help shed those layers so that we can make change, but without all the weight, if that makes sense. And we can see those patterns in people's reports and charts. We can see connections and themes to children or soul group members or family members or soul family members. We can see connections with relationships, blocks, obstructions, and a lot of really beautiful, amazing, powerful things that come through too. So we do deal with karma, but only karma that can be removed. And I would say karma that can be removed, because karma is like an energetic paycheck. If we take too much from one life, we have to pay it back in another life. And it doesn't always look negative. And I want to note that, because so many people think karma is such a negative thing. But if we have a life where we've taken a lot of lives, we might have a life where we give a lot of lives. So I've had people who come through as healers, people who come through as midwives, nurses, and doctors, something to help stabilize and bring back the lives that they have taken in other lives. So it doesn't have to be a negative experience. Paying back that energy can sometimes be incredibly beautiful and powerful. And sometimes those guilts from those negative lives come through and linger even when our karma has been paid. So in those kinds of situations, we call it negative unjustified karma, and those can be removed. For example, we might have a life where we did something that we don't feel proud of, and then we might have had that life where we paid that back and balanced that karma, but the guilt continues to follow us, and that weight brings us down, and that guilt keeps obstructing our growth and development and keeps working as a self-destructive pattern of behavior. So in a case like that, we can remove and heal and send this life off so it stops creating obstructive patterns now that it's been paid back karmatically. So there's a lot to discover about yourself and your soul in these reports. And essentially, I just tell everybody to start here. The reason is because I feel like it answers everything, any question about anybody. If you have issues with your career, it could be tied to your sacral chakra and any pain or obstructions in your sacral chakra that have occurred throughout lifetimes. Our sacral chakra represents our ability to accept energy into our lives, to be creative, to be in charge, to be, and many times it's very strongly associated with our career. And if you have issues with relationships, we, starting from report 1 moving forward, is going to be the best healing process and the best transformational system to repair that system. If we have issues with gift development or pain or fears, phobias, any other issues that come up. Past lives have been associated with so many other beautiful things in the healing process, but this specific system has a way of going through all of those lives. And I used to just believe that this system was, more efficient because it was a shorter span of time. So in 1 hour, we might pick up 3 or 4 past lives. During a past life regression, we might be there 4 hours and we might pick up 4 lives or 2 lives or 1 life. It really depends on how amazing your guide is and how much experience they have. And I personally had an amazing experience when I did it myself, but it took a long time compared to, 1 hour report. So I used to think that it was just more efficient time-wise, but I've begun to understand that it's my gift. So on top of it being more efficient, I don't just bring up a life. I actually go in, heal, remove, and grab fractions of the soul that have been lost, damaged, or hurt. And I do soul reconstruction. So that's something you can't get when you do your own past life regression. Or if you get a past life regression, unless they have that ability and that gift, which I'm not sure if they do, unless I would have read that. So it's a different system and process. You get a lot more out of it. And I have to say that I've seen amazing results. And I think that that's really important to understand too, because I definitely wouldn't keep doing what I'm doing if there weren't beautiful feedback and amazing stories of success from my clients when they come to me. And I think the most profound thing is that my clients always send all their friends over. And I think that's really important because we're not going to share our healing process if we don't feel like it did anything for us. So I think that that's really profound. We can also have traumas at soul level that I have had people or beings incarnate to specifically heal traumas they've experienced in between lives. And I think this is one of the most fascinating things of all, because I know that we have lives in between lives, but you would think that there was a healing system that would be able to heal their energy where they are. But what I've been told and what I understand is Earth's really thick density amplifies everything. So sometimes beings will incarnate here because it is an amplified healing system. It amplifies my healing abilities because the thick atmosphere would amplify everything. It amplifies our emotions, our existence, our feelings. Obviously, our skin is very thick and dense, and it densifies everything else that comes through its atmosphere. So I can see how that would work better, incarnating here to come across me for healing here as opposed to waiting for me to go back. But I think it's truly fascinating and amazing that it all works that way. So if you have questions, please ask. But I do recommend everybody watch this before booking so they understand the process and they are fully aware of what's happening and how the reports work. And thank you so much for listening in. And I hope to be working with you soon.